And welcome everyone. If you're just signing into the webinar, our focus for today's training will be Accounting Advanced. And a little bit about Julia, who will be doing our training. She's one of our consultant partners, bookkeeping and accounting support, including CFO services for large and small businesses, specializing in unique and complex accounting needs of interior design firms and showrooms. Comprehensive procurement services for designers and showrooms. And like most any of our webinars, please feel free to submit your questions in the control panel box as seen here on the screen. We will get to as many questions as we possibly can at the end of the webinar. And now I'm going to kick this over to Julia. Hi, Julia.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
Good, thank you.
Good. All right, so now we're going to switch this over to your screen. And give us just a second to do that. Great. So I see your screen, Julia.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are located. Today, we're going to be talking about some advanced accounting features in Studio Designer. Those of you who joined me a month or so ago, we did more of a basic training, and today we're going to focus on some of the higher level aspects. I usually always like to start everyone off by going to your chart of accounts. So go to settings and scroll down till the header says accounting, and then click on chart of accounts. So your chart of accounts is actually, it's very, very important. It's the baseline of all of your financial data that Studio will pull from and pull into. These chart of accounts at this point have been customized, but Studio actually gives you a fairly comprehensive amount of them when you first sign up for the software. Let's clear that. So always change your per page view to 200. Very important to note, there are numbers related to the chart of accounts. Those are actually assigned by the software as well, and there is a naming. There's a correct way to use these reference numbers. It corresponds with GAAP principles. So the way I usually don't get into why certain ones are called 1s and 2s and 3s, but what I do tell people is when you're adding a new account into your chart of accounts, go into here and look to see what are you adding and what type of an account is similar to maybe at least guess at the number. Because if you wind up not guessing at the number, any account that you create without a reference number will pop up at the top, and then your financial reports will be a little bit skewed. They just won't look as accurate. Another thing to note is when you're adding cash accounts, always make sure you're selecting this box as a cash account, or if you're adding a credit card, always select this box for credit cards. The chart of accounts is important also when you are reviewing your sales codes. So if we go back into your settings and go back to sales codes, I call the sales codes the driver. They didn't pop up. Let's try again. Your sales codes map to your item and then to your financial statement. For some reason, they're not popping up, so we'll go back to them. Let's go into items. Actually, let's create a new item, and then here's your sales code. So as all of you know, you're using the item screen day to day. You're entering all of these new items, and the system will not allow you to save an item without a sales code. And some of you may know this, some of this may be redundant, but your sales code in one click assigns where your financial statement will see your purchase costs and will see your selling costs and will see any other costs. So the mapping of this, the mapping of the sales code is very, very critical actually. And if you map it incorrectly, which we see lots of times when you're trying to create new sales codes, will result in inaccurate financial statements, which one of the main reasons why you are using Studio is to have accurate financial statements. Now, sales code button is deciding to be a little funny today. Let's go into reports. So if you go into reports and you go into legacy and you click on your income statement, again, we're hopping around a little bit, but let's see how that translates. So here you have sales antiques, sales furniture, sales pillows, and then down below, you're going to have cost of sales antiques, cost of sales furniture, cost of sales pillows. So anytime you use a sales code, back in our item, accessories, antiques, that financial data down below, once you invoice, will populate onto your income statement. So this is, the sales code is what tells you and your CPA or your business advisor or any one of your consultants, how much money did you make? How much did it cost you? And what was your margin? The way we like to describe sales codes as well, let's see if they're back, is it's a great way for you to understand where are you making money or where are you making a large margin. So use these very strategically. Definitely don't create too many, because then it actually gets hard. You're going to forget, did I put flowers into accessories or did I put flowers into tabletop? If you, for example, set up a tabletop sales code. So be very mindful, but also remember that if you need help with setting up sales codes, because again, well, let's go to add new in here. So here's your sales code. Let's make a new one. Let's assume that I, as a design firm, sells a lot of custom furniture. I have a custom upholsterer. It's a really big revenue margin for me. I don't have a selling markup that's set across a sales code. I typically see selling markups set across clients. So I would leave this blank. I would leave these percentages blank. And then it asks me, so as you see, there's these red asterisks in different places. And so the red asterisks mean that you can't move on from this screen until you input those account types. So when you enter a new sales code, it's going to ask you for an income account, a markup account, and a cost of sales account. So your income account should correspond to custom furniture, and your cost of sales account should correspond to custom furniture. If that's a little confusing, go into your chart of accounts and just put in regular furniture. And you'll see that there's a sales furniture account that's 4,020, and there's a cost of sales furniture account that's 5,020. So hopefully that's a little bit of an indicator to you to say, oh, okay, so if sales furniture is an income account and the code is income sales, you could follow that same pattern. So you could say, my income account needs to be, and we need to create one. I like them to be named the same. So this is a sales furniture. So I would name this sales custom furniture. I'm actually going to leave my reference number blank for right now because I want them to remain in the right numerical order, and I'll show you then how we find that. If you compare it to furniture, you would make this income type and you would make this income sales. And the other two things for right now you don't need. And it's not a cash account and it's not a credit card account. So neither one of those you need to check, and you click save. The markup account depends on how your firm likes to see markup. There are definitely some firms out there that prefer markup called out separately and apart. So right now, if we look at our income statement, it just says sales furniture, 44,000, and then it says cost of sales furniture, 21,000. So this margin on furniture at this firm, for example, is actually pretty good. It's pretty high. But it's lumped together, right? The cost is here and the sale of the product, including the markup, is here. You could decide to separate out that markup. You could have it in its own section. It would be down here. You could have it right below. It'll say sales furniture, markup on sales furniture. It depends on how you like to review your financial statements. There's no right or wrong, but that's why this option is here. Most of the time, I would say majority, again, not always, the markup account is the same as the income account because you want the total of the selling costs to go into this account, sales custom furniture. So if you go back to our example, if you're stuck on cost of sales and you're like, shoot, I don't know what to do with that, look at a previous example, and we were looking at furniture. And furniture is a different type of account, right? It says that the type is an expense and the code is cost of sales. So you would just follow suit. You would go to add new, cost of sales, custom furniture. I'm gonna leave this blank again so I could map it out correctly, and I do cost of sales, save. And now the mapping of your sales code is correct. So if you go to save and now you're in custom furniture, and as everyone knows, first dibs is usually the first vendor. Custom sectional. We're shipping at 219th Street. The room is breakfast, item, L-shaped custom sectional. And so down here, we're going to say that the cost was $10,000 to us. Right away, the selling cost copied over. Again, for those of you who don't know, that happens because of the codes. The codes should actually be set to copy purchase always. This just prevents you from making errors down the road. And what this means is if you decided to increase the purchase price, but you wanted the selling price to stay the same, or vice versa, if you wanted to make this $11,000, and the purchase price wouldn't change. And actually the selling price didn't change, right? It reverted back to the 10,000 because the system is preventing you from selling something for less than you bought it for. So if you were to change this, because price increases right now are obviously crazy, this number would populate with it right away. Our markup is set at 35. So this is that box. When you were in sales codes, there was a section that said, how would you like to map your markup? This is the box that gets mapped. So again, if you're a firm who wants to see all markup and every item, this box to go to a different screen, this is the information that would be pulled. When you don't do it that way, when you do it the way we set it up, and let's try again to see if still no. If you don't do it that way, your total, your unit cost times the quantity and your markup, so this 14,175 will go into your revenue account right up here, sales custom furniture. So that's a quick overview as to why the sales codes are important. Let's go back to our chart of accounts and let's delete that, refresh our screen. And you'll see that I added these two accounts. And as you see, they populated up at the top. So sales custom furniture is currently right here because it doesn't have a number, and we want to give it a number. So here it is, sales custom furniture, and then expenses. What I like to do is I like to always change your per page view to 200, scroll down until you see roughly your last income account, your last sales revenue category. So this is 4090. You could throw it obviously into anything. You could make it 4022, 4031, 4041. I'm going to add it to the bottom, make this one 4091. 4091. I know that cost of sales accounts always start with 5, and I actually want them to be the same number, or the same, the last 2 the same or the last 3 the same. And the reason for that is because then they show up in the same order on your income at the top section of your income statement versus your cost of goods. So here sales and sales furniture is here, and then sales pillows is behind it. Down here it should be the same. Sales furniture is here and sales pillows is behind it. That way, if you're trying to figure out your margin, you're just going down the list, you're just cruising. So it should be much, much easier for you. Okay, let's actually complete our item transaction. I'd like to see this populate onto the income statement, and I'd like to move some vendor payments using suspense, and then actually look at some vendor payments in the general ledger, something that I do quite often. So I'm done in here. Here's my sectional. I'm going to add it to a proposal. This client pays right away. Go to accounting in. 19th Street. Whoops. They decided to wire me money into my Citizens Bank account. For those of you who have never taken a webinar with me, or maybe some of you have, I am the biggest advocate and believer in utilizing this check number to the best of your ability, both on the client side and on the vendor side. It's incredibly helpful, especially when you're looking or doing anything in your general ledger. If this check number field is blank, it makes searching not impossible, but really, really difficult and actually quite time consuming. So the more information you could put in here, the better. A lot of our firms these days are obviously using Stripe or Payscape. So we're adding even like the unique Payscape ID into here, sometimes the 6-digit date, ACHs, Stripes. I'm trying to put as much information into the check number as possible. I'll actually show you why. So this is 1507. As you see, it wouldn't let me post this transaction while this box was blank because there's this little red error. This amount must equal to amount to apply. So because we're in the payment method receive and apply, this dollar value in this box needs to match the dollar values in this box. So I'm currently trying to apply $15,000, $1,575. But if I put a different dollar value, the system won't be able to post it. And this error is actually fairly small, right? So you may be looking around to say, oh my gosh, what happened? What happened? But it is right here for you. It is saying to you that the amount received doesn't equal the amount to apply, and it's off by $75. So one of those numbers needs to change. So we're going to apply this to this item. Now the client paid. That's great. Go back into here, refresh our screen. And here it is. And this vendor, oh, First Dibs, wanted their money right away. So I created the order, and I'm going to pay it. Quick review of your order date and of your system date. So those of you who are doing your own accounting or are providing the accounting support for firms, know that every user, every time you're logged in, you have a system date. So if you go, I wonder if I actually am limited on my permissions in here. If you go into your settings, you should be able to see my company profile. I'm just logged into a test account, and in there it'll have your name. It'll have your name, and on the very bottom there'll be a spot that says system date. So I use the system date all of the time, especially when I'm working on general ledgers or recreating data. And it's important to note that, so Studio, as I'm sure you know, when there's not an option to select a date, like in Money In right now, you can select a date. You can say that you got this payment on 6/1 and it'll post it into your ledger on 6/1. Certain transactions like invoices, purchase orders, and proposals, there's no option for that. You just select the items and it creates an order, a purchase, a proposal, or an invoice number. So you need to become familiar with why you would need to change your system date, when it's applicable, when you need to change it back, and why it's important. So since my permissions are limited, I actually can't, like I said, show you that step. But just note, for example, for purchase orders, your payment should always be after your order date. I mean, if you think about it, you shouldn't be able to order something you can't pay for something without ordering it. So even though First Dibs may not be receiving this purchase order, the purchase order date should still be before your payment date. I'm actually going to go in and pay this right away today. So thankfully, I created my purchase order in a timely fashion. I'm going to go into payment. I'm going to select one of my very many credit cards, Amex, and I'm going to pay just a deposit of $5,000. Here's your check number reference number again, and I'm going to show you where this populates into your item and then where to go from there. So again, I like to use, I like the check number, especially on the vendor side, to help me identify how the payment was made. I'm going to post this vendor payment. So if you go back to the sectional and you go back to view payments, this screen can be a little bit confusing. There's something called a vendor deposit. There's something called a vendor payment, client deposit, client payment. The deposits, both vendor and client, are always on the item prior to the item being invoiced. Once an item is invoiced, you'll see the payment move from down here to up here to a payment, and the same on the client side. And it'll happen simultaneously because you're invoicing the item, and both the purchase costs and the selling costs roll up. So in this example, this check number helps me identify how this was paid, how this item was paid. But if you're someone who uses 5 different credit cards and you're trying to do some research, if this just says 06, 23, 22, this won't help you. This won't help you. You'll have to then go back into your records and say, oh shoot, I don't remember how I paid that. So copy this, and then let's actually just go right into our general ledger. And here's our check number. So if I used just the date, actually, let's see what's in our general ledger. If I use just the date in my check number, or if I actually don't use a date, I may not be able to identify, right? You could post payments to purchase orders and post money in by having this number be blank. And then it makes it much more difficult to look at all of the information. Let's actually talk about how to use this a little bit. So if I'm trying to say to myself, you know, I'm doing some work on reconciling information with vendors. I know restoration hardware can be really, really tricky. Let me see all of the payments that were made to them. I would be able to go into my general ledger and sort by my journals. So your journals are up here. You could obviously select any one of them. If you decide to keep this field blank, all of your journals will pop up. And some of them seem redundant. So for example, why do you have, if you sort for an invoice number, I'm hoping I could find one. If you sort by your invoice number, you'll be able to see a lot of, again, I'm trying to find one. Oh, here we go. Every single item becomes every single item in here has a purchase cost and a selling cost, so that translates then into your general ledger. So as you see, there's income miscellaneous for $37. There's income time billing for $807. There's accounts receivable. All of these numbers tie together. And if you're trying to just understand, for example, what happened with payments or money in or money out, this may be really confusing to you. So start off by sorting by your journals. If I'm doing work with reconciling a vendor, I would sort by cash disbursements. So a cash disbursement is equivalent to a payment. So it would be anything related to money out. It would be either, so if you go, let's go back in here, accounting, if you go to money out, there's 2 types of payments, order payments and office payments. Both of those payments are cash disbursements. So this would show you anything that was paid in a cash disbursement. And you're not limited to the account either. So again, if you're trying to say to yourself, wow, I know this, let's say you did a really poor job of using this check number and you knew that it was paid sometime in the month of May, you could say, okay, let me just be safe. I don't really remember. What did I pay in May? I don't know the card I used, but let me look through my cash disbursements to say, oh shoot, you know, I obviously forgot to add this check number. And this will show you everything and anything posted through money out. Cash receipts are the same, obviously in reverse. These are all client related. And this again will show you, where did you accept the money? Did you take it into undeposited funds? Do you have a purchasing account and a design fee account? Where did the money go? Hopefully you always used a check number, because again, when they're blanks, it's much, much harder to track. That's just a quick rundown. I'm in the general ledger. I usually always have the general ledger tab open at all times, regardless of whose database I'm working in. It allows me to be a little bit more efficient. If I have any questions, or if prices don't add up, or if Restoration Hardware, for example, charged $5,000, but it was applied to 3 different items, I could look for that in here. I'm able to see that, broken out. And again, you would do that by cash disbursements. You could sort by vendor. We haven't ordered from them in a while. Still nothing. Okay. Anyway, that's a quick overview of why, again, the check number is important and how you would utilize your general ledger. One more thing I'd like to cover, and I know the questions are coming in, is how to use suspense, especially when it comes to the PO side. We're actually going to use the same example of our sectional. So our sectional is now, there's a balance due, it needs to be paid, and we're going to accidentally overpay it. And this time we're not going to use Amex, we're going to use a wire out of Bank of America, 06-23-22. And so now this is overpaid. And at the same time, First Dibs reached out to me and said that they need to increase the cost of the product because of the shipping. Something happened with the shipping. And I decided not to add it to the item, though I don't know why you would do that. It's the same vendor. But I decided to clone the item and make it another component, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to clone the item. I'm going to go back to 07B and make this. The client wanted to see the additional freight separate. I don't know, additional freight for sectional. And this is going away, this is 0. And my freight is 355. 355. Always mark up your freight if you can, if it's in your contract. Save and close, save and close. This is on PO 200-255, and currently this isn't on a PO at all, but I'd like to add it. Go to edit, go into here. If it has the same ship to, as a reminder, if it has the same ship to, it will be able to add it to the same order. If it doesn't, it cannot. Or if one of your ship tos is blank and the other one has a ship to, it still will not combine those 2 items on an order. I'm gonna hit save and close. So now I have one item in here with an overpayment of $250 and another item that has a balance due of $355. I want to move that money around. I need to, and as we know, Studio is item-based, so all of your items need to be clean and need to tie. So we need to physically remove that money and put it on another item. And you could do this obviously in the same project, in the same PO, in different projects on different POs. So go into your payment screen, and this is where I use an account called Suspense. So Suspense comes with everybody's database. You go into your chart of accounts. It's always here. It should, everyone's reference number should be the same unless you renamed it. And it's basically either a holding spot, an account that sometimes I'll use for questions, or I try to use it as a wash account. I try to use it for moving any type of money, whether it be on the client side or on the vendor side. And so in this example, I want to remove the $250. I'm going to make my account Suspense. I make my check number very specific. I will either make it my original check number that's ties to the item, or I'll put Suspense in here and I'll use today's date again. So here's that. So $250 is going into Suspense, and I'm going to post the vendor payment. If you're unsure, let's say this is the first time you're doing it and you move the money off of the item and you're like, oh shoot, I have no idea where it went. Go into your general ledger, clear out these filters, put the account in Suspense, and see what's in there. This account, actually, right, there's quite a bit going in and out of Suspense. The goal of Suspense is to always see a credit and a debit, a credit and a debit. Looks like this, for example, was not cleared out. it was added in there, but then didn't come out of there. So here's my check number, and I see that I put $250 into this account. But I'm not done with what my goal is, right? So I want to go back into my purchase order. Happens to be the same one, so it's super easy. And I want to apply $250 to this other item. I need to make sure that my suspense account is the from account and my check number is the same. To me, having the same check number on a suspense transaction when you're moving money in and money out, when you're doing any type of debit and credit, is really helpful. It'll help you tie into that ledger when you're reconciling suspense. Suspense is an account that can be reconciled, and I'll show you that. Are you sure you want to post the entry? Yes, I am. So just from the item level, this is now clean. This doesn't have an overpayment. And the money that we did overpay on first dibs on the actual sectional got moved to the additional freight that we owe first dibs. And here's my new balance, $105. If you go into your general ledger and you're in suspense, just refresh your screen and you'll be able to see, oh, look, I have $250 as a positive and $250 as a negative. I know that, again, at least for this transaction, I did a good job. I zeroed it out. At the same time, let's say you forgot what you did and you go back into, this is where check numbers are really important. If you're looking at this report months down the road and you're like, shoot, I don't remember how I paid for this sectional, if I paid for it at all, why do I still have a balance? Go into view payments. Pull up this check number, copy it, say, oh, that's funny. Why does that say suspense? You would go into your ledger, you would put suspense into the check number and search for it. And you'll be able to then see and hopefully refresh your memory to say, oh, right, I moved something off of one item into another item. And you would then be able to pull up this order in your item screen and do the due diligence to understand. And hopefully you'll remember too, that you took money off of one item and applied it to the other. Again, this happened to be the same order. A lot of times it'll be orders that are different, potentially the same client, sometimes different clients. You could do the same thing with suspense and money in. We typically do that when we're trying to move money from the funds available account, whether it be a client is requesting a refund. So 19th Street has $12,000 on account. We stopped working together and they emailed us to say, can we please have our $12,000 back? I need to tie this money in this account and have it flow over into money out in some way. Suspense is a great tool for that. A lot of times too, let's say a client has several projects and one project has funds available and one project doesn't. You would be able to use suspense for moving the funds available between projects as well. I'm going to just look at a couple questions. I know questions actually started coming in as soon as we got on, as soon as the session started. Let me see, I'm going to go back to the beginning and try to get through as many questions as I can. Robin has a great question. So 2 identical items were entered into proposals and orders. When a client paid and money in was recorded, the incorrect item of the duplicate was used to pay the balance. Now I'm unable to delete. If I'm understanding that correctly, it looks like that there's 2 items. One has a partial payment and the other has a partial payment. And yes, you can't delete any items if there's general ledger activity, and you really wouldn't want to because Studio is so permanent. You'd have to move balances. So, and you could actually do that through money in. It looks like that's where it looks like the money in is where the duplicate is, or you could obviously do it through money. You could do it through the PO if it's on the PO side. Remember, when you're moving money on the client side, you always want to go here, apply payment to items from funds available. The top 3 here in your payment method are always client related. Receive miscellaneous payment is more, I always say refund related, but when it's not related to a purchase order, it's refund related for your utilities, for your rent. Maybe you got some sort of commission from a vendor. anything like that related goes into receive miscellaneous, but your top 3 are client related. So if you need to remove money from a duplicate item, always go to apply payment to items from funds available. And I don't know if this client has any overpayments. Oh, they do. They overpaid a treasure chest by a lot of money, and they actually need to apply it to another treasure chest. So hopefully, Robin, this is similar to your example. So you would take this negative dollar value, and you want to put it back into funds available up here. I think it's incredibly important, even when you're moving money, to use the same naming system in your check number when you're moving money, because A, it populates on the item, and B, it populates on your payment application report, which could get very confusing and long the longer you have projects open. So back in the desktop days, funds available was always called deposit, client deposit, and to this day, that's what I refer to it as. So anytime I'm moving money out of funds available for any of our clients, I'll always put CDP in the 6-digit date. This will populate on the payment application report, and as soon as I see it, I know that somebody moved money. Hopefully it was me, but if it was the designer, hopefully they use the same naming features as well. So if CDP doesn't make sense for you, come up with a system that does. Call it CFA, client funds available, which is now what populates into this screen. So if you hit post payment, you'll see funds available increase significantly to $23,000. And let's actually go ahead and apply it to the correct treasure chest, because something obviously happened with this client. I don't know what it is. So Robin, once you combine the payments, so move the payments around, you'll then be able to at least make the item inactive and get it off of your project report. Somebody's asking about the recording. Sarah could speak to that at the end of the webinar. I know they're always recorded and available on the Learning Hub, and I think pretty immediately, maybe within 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, that's correct, Julia. Recording is available shortly after, and the recordings can be found inside of your Studio Designer account, top right at the question mark.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Resources.
So somebody's asking about markup. So is markup recommended to be by sales code and not by client? So I know we talked about that a little bit earlier. I typically don't see that setup. And let's see if our sales code, sales codes is back. I typically don't really see that much anymore at all. I typically see your markup being dictated by your client under codes. Again, some firms are different. Sometimes you'll have a standard markup for freight, for example, but typically the markup is customized per the client contract. And a lot of times you will have slight variations in markup too if you do some custom work. So any type of custom work usually has a higher markup than anything retail related. So this is actually, the next question is regarding Stripe, and is a great question. We're seeing this across the board often. So when you're using Stripe, Stripe is taking out a fee. So when you're logging into your Stripe account, you're seeing a payment of $15,000, but you're really only applying $14,500. You're only getting $14,500 to the bank. So what do you do in that scenario? So let's actually go in. Do we have anything open? 19th Street. So Stripe received the full dollar value. So if you think about it mathematically, Stripe still received let's pick one. Stripe still received $100 or $300 and wanted to do something bigger. So Stripe still received $36.25. And typically they're taking a 3% fee. But the $36.25 is what the client paid. So you can't short pay this by $1. You can't go in here and say, oh, I only received $35.25 and then have an open balance of $1. You're never going to get the dollar from the client, A. And B, the client paid the right amount. Stripe took that fee. So the way to record Stripe payments is always to apply it in the item screen in full. So in Money In, you'd go to Receive and Apply. I'm using Citizens Bank. I'm typing in Stripe. If they're giving you a specific ID tied to this payment, I would put that in here as well. You could put that in here in the authorization number also. But I received the $36.25 from my client. I need to show that this item was paid, so $3,012. So it winds up becoming a two-step process. So I post the payment in here, but at the same time, I need to then record the $1.09 fee. So I'm going to accounting, I'm going to money out, and I'm going to office payments. I'm going to add Stripe as a vendor. Stripe, it's a Stripe 062322. I like to put it in the reference number invoice 3012, and let's see if it's set up in my chart of accounts. So if you are somebody who's using Stripe, Payscape, PayPal, any one of the vendors that's taking a fee for transactions, you should have an expense account called either merchant processing or credit card fees. So actually it looks like that does not exist in this account. So we're going to add one. So we're going to go back into here, chart of accounts. And these I like to add alphabetically. So I'm going to see where my expense accounts are. So here's my administrative expenses is what they're called. And I'm going to add merchant fees as $54.41. And this is actually, if you're somebody who accepts any one of those payment processors, it's a really important account to track on your income statement because it could be extremely expensive. So this is an expense account and the code is administrative, right? It's not PO related at all, so save. And now I'm back into money out. So this particular transaction was $36, it was $1, but as I'm sure many of you know, those fees could get hefty. I want to make sure I could tie it back into my invoice number, and I think it was $1.09, was roughly the 3%. And then I populated into my, if I'm in Citizens Bank, it populated into my pending payment screen, and I want to post it from there. But that is an excellent question. It does, like I said, come up now all of the time. The fees can get hefty. Sometimes some firms will bill back for fees. You have to be mindful of that. It depends on which state you are in. Different states have different laws regarding credit card fees. You may be able to still get away with it, depending on how you call that processing fee. So for example, you cannot, like New York is a state where you cannot bill back credit card fees, but the way vendors and like some of our clients get around that is by renaming the expense. So we're billing back a different type of expense to capture that fee. Obviously, it would depend on your client contract as well. I want to post my $1.09. So every time you accept one of those payments, it does make that step that much longer, unfortunately. So Claire has a question. I was taught initially never to actually pay an order with a credit card and to wait until the statement arrives. Then I'll pay all the items on the statement. And then everything goes into money out and you can post it all at once as one check. Does that make sense, or is it better to pay each item as we pay it via the credit card? It's actually a really great question. I would say it depends on how your firm operates. We tell clients never post a purchase order payment or any type of money out payment from a receipt. So just because Pottery Barn sent you a receipt that says $1,100 doesn't mean that $1,100 will populate onto your credit card statement. A lot of times shipping changes, they charge 50% deposits, freight changes, that they'll charge you prepaid sales tax even though they shouldn't, et cetera, et cetera. But no, depending too on the size of your firm, waiting till the end of the month could actually cause more problems. Because if you have one person in the office who's in charge of making all the payments and the designers, for example, are entering all the items, How does the designer know that something got paid if you're waiting until 30 days after the fact? You could definitely create a system for it, log into your credit card once or twice a week, pull all the transactions from the credit card that got paid and post them. So do that every Monday or do that every Friday. Or if it's a really big office, that's something that's done Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because we want the project worksheets to be accurate and for the designers to be able to utilize them with the most up-to-date information. Hopefully that is helpful. Hopefully that's answered that question. Katha, hopefully I said that name correct. This is a great question. When you apply payments to proposals, does it show up in the general ledger? So it does, and actually we're gonna go look, but it doesn't on the item level. So you have to do a little bit more digging when it's on the client side. So let's take suspense out. Let's pick citizens. Let's go to cash receipts. So all of these receipts had occurred. Let's go to this $2,000 one. So do you see how it's telling you who the client is? AV Los Angeles. But all it's telling you is that these dollars went into client deposits. So that's not very helpful at all. And it'll always do that. So here's $10,000. But what items did it apply into, or did it go into funds available, which this looks like it did. The best way to look at client payments is to go into your reports, go into all reports and search for a payment application. This is actually an old report from desktop. I typically like to use the by date one. Let's go into 19th Street. And this is where then you'll be able to see how the money was applied. So the general ledger may be a good starting point for you if you're trying to say to yourself, shoot, I don't remember, did this client pay in May? I would go to your general ledger and take a peek, filter by client. Up here, if you're looking for something specific, actually I'd get rid of the cash account. I want to see all of my cash receipts from this client. But if you're trying to understand how money was applied, the client payment application report is what you would pull next to say, oh, okay, did money go into their deposit account? Did money get applied to the item? Did money get moved around? And so look, here's CDP and it's from 2019. So if this was blank, if this check number was blank, it may initially be confusing to whoever's pulling this report to say, why is there a negative and a positive? The CDP, for me, especially if you're like, we're in and out of databases, so I'm not as familiar if clients are doing their own payments or anything like that. But if I pull this report, it should be able to be very self-explanatory. And I could recreate the puzzle very, very quickly. And then here's my deposit balance down here. But that's a great question. Alexandra has a question. Do you have any suggestions on how to utilize Studio on a cash basis rather than accrual? So Studio is set up to be accrual for a number of reasons. Really, the developers feel that in this space, in the design community, in the design world, you have so much of your work, especially on the product side, is in work in process. So if you have goods that are in progress for long periods of time, therefore, depending on how you look at it, that would automatically put you on an accrual basis. Not all the time, of course, depending on your personal situation. But for those of our firms that do file on a cash basis, we're just converting them. And unfortunately, typically it doesn't take too long, especially if your record keeping is in good shape. But the main thing to look at when you're cash versus accrual is your client deposits, accounts payable, and on the flip side, accounts receivable and vendor deposit accounts. So you would just be reversing those. You wouldn't be able to reverse them line by line. And in Studio, when you go to journal entries, you actually won't be able to hit some of those accounts. Like you wouldn't be able to adjust client deposit. It's not an option because it's item based. The client deposit account is generated from the items. And the same with vendor deposits. You wouldn't be able to hit those either. But you could export everything into Excel and make the adjustments manually. So I think a lot of times, and when we have clients that come to us and say we want to stay cash, it becomes a conversation. Why do you want to stay cash? What are the benefits? What are the pros and cons of switching, and what are the tax consequences for doing that? But unfortunately, I think if that is something that you if you want to continue to stay cash, you don't have a better option than doing it manually. So someone asked, what is the minimum information required in order to set up our accounts? I think that's a really involved question, obviously. I'm assuming they mean your chart of accounts. So those of you who have come from different softwares, you probably have a chart of accounts already in QuickBooks. A lot of times the revenue and cost of goods may be much simpler, but maybe your expenses are more detailed. Maybe you have meals broken out versus entertainment versus travel versus taxis versus airfare, for example. So definitely work with a consultant if you're trying to align any previous chart of accounts with your current chart of accounts. So great question. What is the best way to give a client a refund? I think there's a couple schools of thought on this, and it depends on the situation. So are you giving them a refund because the price of an item, let's see, where are we? Because they decided they didn't want an item and you decided to buy it back, which obviously we always try not to do, but you did because you're really, really nice. Let's deal with this item, for example. And it depends on your client. Is a client really particular? Do they want to see the overpayment on an existing item, for example? So let's go into Jasper Showroom. So we're on 19th Street. Let's go to counting money in. 48. I need to apply money to this first. So they paid with a wire. I know I use this check reference number today, so I'm gonna actually just help myself down the road, and I'm gonna make it more unique and putting an 01 at the end. We paid this amount. Great, save and close. Go back into your items. So for some reason, Jasper took too long, the client got mad, and you said to them, okay, I'm gonna try really hard, I'm gonna work with the Jasper Showroom and work with them on obtaining a refund. But in the meantime, I'm going to give a client back this money. I always make sure I go into copy purchase, I select never, I go back into my items, and I make this 0. So right now, this is showing an overpayment of $6,115.50. When I return any items, or when I give people, when I return the items, or when I give credits back, or when a client decides they don't like something, I try to change that or add that detail into the description. So I'm going to put refunded. So that way I'm clear. I would probably make some notes in here, or I put something in the vendor description to say I'm working with Jasper to try to obtain this refund. I personally prefer to adjust the original item. That's me personally. I know there are a lot of different firms who will make negative items and then apply the negative item to a future proposal. I would prefer not to do that. I would personally prefer to keep the accounting on the original item and then be able to track it. So I would either then put this money into funds available by going back into money in like we did recently, or I would put it onto, let's say they ordered a new sectional. So then I would put it immediately into funds available and then move it onto the new sectional right away. So A, I don't forget that it's in funds available, and B, I could track that because I'd be able to track that through the general ledger and I would communicate it to the client. So that's a little bit of a different option than making the negative items for capturing a refund. Sarah, I know we only have a few minutes. Do I have time for one or two more questions?
Yeah, that would be great, Julia. One or two more. Thank you.
So Jackie has a question. We were told the date on the money out for credit cards has to match the date the transaction cleared the credit card. If this is true, can you explain why? I would say more for audit purposes, IRS purposes, and helping reconcile your credit card transaction. So if you, going back to somebody's question earlier, if you placed a Pottery Barn order today, they sent you a receipt, or what you thought was a receipt for $1,200. You went in and posted it to money out, but it really has a 12-week lead time. And you now posted the payment with today's date, but it never hit your card. The person who's reconciling your credit card is then going to have a question, come to you with a question, void the transaction, have to call Pottery Barn to understand what happened. So it's creating much more work, as opposed to if you transition to the system of posting transactions from your credit card activity, it'll alleviate all of that. At the same time, if you're ever audited, they're going to pick different periods of time to audit you, and they're going to say, okay, give me all the transactions that occurred in this month. And you're going to not be able to do that because your general ledger payments do not match the statements, and the statements and your general ledger need to tie from an audit purpose. So Sean's asking, what happens if I void an invoice and there is a payment on it? So when you have payments on items, those payments and the items are invoiced. I was trying to go to an example, and this will be our last question. So if you have payments on items, oh, there's our treasure chest. There's our sectional. I don't remember if we invoiced that. Let's actually invoice it now. We're only going to invoice, oh, I guess we should invoice this too. So as soon as you create an invoice, the accounting in Studio, there's all these different general ledger transactions that occur as soon as you hit this invoice button. And if you go back into view payments, remember we talked about how there's these 4 sections now: payments, deposits, payments, deposits. So your client deposit came off and became a client payment. And when that happened, there was a journal entry that was created in the system. Before you void an invoice, you should move the payment off. I typically put it back into client deposit, like I'll put it back into, what I call client deposit. I put it back into funds available. I'll void the invoice. I will then do whatever I need to do. And then I'll reapply the money from funds available. The reason is that you don't want the journals to be conflicted, incorrect, or confused when it comes to payments and deposits. And when you become sort of void happy and you're constantly clicking the void button with payments on the items, you're not reversing these 2 transactions, client deposit and client payment. I would say that's a fairly simple explanation as to how those 2 accounts work. I know it could be very time consuming and painful if you have a really big invoice for $300,000 and the designer comes to you and says, oh my gosh, they're returning this item. I need to void this whole invoice. So we try to strategically invoice all the time, whether you do it maybe by room or you do it by vendor, or you just try to limit the amount of items on an invoice for that reason, so that if there's voids, you're able to remove all of the payments prior to the void happening. I think that's pretty much it. We're out of time for today.
We are. Yeah, thank you so much, Julia. I appreciate your time and instruction for all the users that joined. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm going to share the last slide, which is Julia's contact information, in addition to the support team's information. And thanks again, Julia.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So to reach Julia and her team for one-to-one support, her direct email I have listed here, julia@newagefinancialconsulting.com. Her email, or excuse me, her phone number and her website, newagefinancialconsulting.com. So go check that out. And as always, you can reach the internal support team via email support@studiodesigner.com. You can chat with the support team and schedule non-billable 15-minute phone calls. And as a reminder, this training will be available as a recording. You can access that recording in your account when you log in at the question mark top right, and then you'll select visit our learning hub. And that recording will be live within 24 hours or less. Okay, thank you everyone. Bye-bye.